semiconductors. It's my honor to be here to share our research with you. The title of our research is Octave Spanning Frequency Comb Generation based on a dual-mode square macro laser and a Brillouin fiber loop. Here is the outline. I'm going to introduce our work in 4 parts. Firstly, I will introduce the optical frequency comb, and then I will propose a novel method to generate octave spanning combs and give some results. Finally, I will summarize our work. First of all, is the background of the optical frequency comb. Optical frequency comb provides a ruler that straightforwardly links microwave and optical frequencies. It revolutionized time and frequency metrology in the late 1990s. Rapidly, frequency combs found applications beyond their original purpose. For example, optical clocks, frequency time transfer, coherent data, the noise microwaves, and so on. Optical frequency comb is a spectrum of with coherent evenly spaced narrow laser lines. This equation is referred to as the comb equation. It states that while a frequency comb consists of millions of optical modes, only 2 degrees of freedom are needed to define the frequency of each individual optical mode. They are the repetition rate and the laser offset frequency. Repetition rate is the frequency spacing of the comb, and the offset frequency comes from a change of a carrier phase to an optical pulse envelope. As a result, optical frequency comb has the ability to define the optical frequencies in terms of microwave frequencies. Full frequency stabilization of the comb is achieved by physically controlling the repetition rate and the laser offset rate. The repetition rate can be obtained by direct photo detection of the optical pulses. The offset frequency is detected by frequency to two frequency self-referencing technique. This technique means that the comb covers an octave spanning spectrum. The most widespread and mature frequency comb technology is mono-locked laser using erbium doped fiber as a gain medium. This comb system includes gain fiber, pump laser, amplifier, and nonlinear fiber. They are entirely spliced together, thus making it robust. Repetition rate ranging from 0.1 to 1 GHz is limited by the cavity length. Besides, the second method is electro-optic frequency combs. An electro-optic modulator driven by a microwave signal is employed to generate sidebands on the continuous wave laser. Efforts to increase the bandwidth includes spectral broadening in optical fibers to generate octave spanning combs. Advantage of the electro-optic combs is tunability. The third method is micro-resonator frequency combs. It uses the Kerr effect in whispering gallery micro-resonators. Importantly, soliton frequency combs gives chance to on-chip optical clock generation. Its repetition rates ranges from 0.1 to 1 terahertz, and it depends on the physical size of the micro-resonator. Here, we present a novel method to generate an octave spanning comb with the repetition up to the 40 GHz. Next is our experimental setup. Our method is based on the nonlinear spectral broadening of dual-mode pumped Brillouin comb. It consists of 3 main parts. The seed source is a homemade semiconductor microcavity laser and emits dual mode for generating combs via the 4-wave mixing. The enhanced 4-wave mixing for frequency comb and optical pulse generation is realized in the Brillouin fiber loop. The fiber loop is constructed by a HNLF, highly nonlinear fiber, and a circulator. Furthermore, the wideband spectrum relies on the high-energy pulse. Meanwhile, an ultra-short pulse is desired considering the coherence. As a result, we use the dispersion managed pulse compression and amplification stage as the third part. It consists of a DCF, dispersion composition fiber, and an EDFA. Next, let me show you some experimental results. Firstly, the performance of the C laser is shown in this slide. Inside in the left figure is the macroscopic image of the square macrocavity laser. The macrocavity laser has a sun length of 30 micrometer and a direct connected waveguide width of 2 micrometer. Mm, we can see that a stable dermal lysine at around 1.5 micrometer. The red figure is the lysine spectrum at 24 milliampere. The wavelength interval of the dermals is 0.3 nanometer, corresponding to 38 GHz. Meanwhile, the intensity ratio of dermals is less than 3 dB, benefiting for the four-well mixing process. Then, here is the dual-pumped breathing comb generated in the fiber loop when the pump power is 28 dBm. From the optical spectrum, we can see that the breathing comb has 167 optical tones with 38 GHz spacing. Besides, the optical pulse train has a period of 26 picosecond and the sinusoidal waveform. Reason for the sinusoidal waveform is the intensity ratio of 14 dB for the pump light and the newly generated comb lines. Next, FBGs, fiber Bragg gratings are employed to suppress the pump light to realize a short pulse for wideband comb generation. The FBG in the experiment has a reflectivity of the 99% and a bandwidth of 2 nanometer. In the case of only one FBG, the intensity of the pump light is still 10 dB, higher than that of the adjacent comb lines. As a result, two FBGs are cascaded to achieve spectral shaping. Meanwhile, the pulse width is compressed to 1.6 picosecond with low pedestal. In order to boost the peak power of the optical pulse, EDFA is adopted to amplify the power. However, nonlinear and dispersion effect will lead to the distortion of the pulse shape. To solve the problem, a piece of DCF with the normal dispersion is employed for trap composition and pulse shaping. The left figure shows the measured optical pulses after the dispersion management when the output power of EDFA is 25 dBm. It can be observed that the optimal pulse with the smallest pedestal is generated using 5-meter DCF. Besides, the optical pulses before and after dispersion composition is shown in the red figure. The pulse duration is reduced from 1.6 picosecond to 494 picosecond, and the pulse peak power is increased to 70 watts. Finally, the optical pulse is sent to a 20-meter HNLF for nonlinear spectral broadening. We successfully generated a 38 GHz-based octave spanning comb with a spectral range of 1,100 nanometers. In conclusion, we propose a novel method to generate octave spanning optical frequency comb. A dual-mode laser pumped breathing cavity is used for optical comb generation with a bandwidth of 50 nanometer. Assisted by the FBG, spectral shaping is accomplished to obtain a 1.6 picosecond optical pulse with a repetition rate of 26 picosecond. Furthermore, a dispersion managed pulse amplification is adopted to compress the pulse to 494 femtoseconds with a peak power of 70 watts. Such a high-energy pulse train is beneficial for wideband combs generation by the nonlinear effect. As a result, an octave spanning comb with a spectral range of 1,100 nanometers is generated successfully. Okay, that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, speaker, for the nice talk. Now the session is open for questions.
Is the repetitional rate tunable in this method?
The repetition in our method depends on the wavelength interval of the square macro laser. So in my presentation today, the repetition rate is fixed. However, the wavelength, the tunable wavelength interval can be achieved by the square macrocavity laser using squaring pattern injection window. Next, we will use this kind of the macrocavity laser to realize the tunable repetition rate.
Thank you.
I have a question. So can you go back to your experimental results showing the compressed pulse? So I think in the conclusion you said that the generated optical fluid comb is about 15 nanometer wide, right? And looking at this compressed pulse, it doesn't seem that you have compressed the pulse to the bandwidth limited case. So can you comment on this?
The pulse compression. I'm sorry, can you
So if you have 15 nanometer in the optical spectral domain, you would have approximately around 100 femtosecond in pulse in the time domain if your phase is fully compensated in the spectral domain. But here you have shown a pulse duration reduction from 1.6 picosecond to 494 femtosecond. But according to this simple Fourier transform relationship, 494 is probably not your lowest achievable pulse width. So can you comment on this you think that you have, well, there's still some way that you can go to achieve narrower pathways in the time domain?
First, I use the FBG to compress the optical pulse from the breathing comb, breathing comb, and it is compressed the optical pulse to 1.6 picosecond, and then we use the DCF to perturb the optical pulse, and during the dispersion composition, we compress the pulse to 494 femtosecond.
All right, never mind. Any further questions from the audience? If not, let's give a round of applause to all the speakers in this session. And I think that's the end of this session. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Lee. Thank you so much for being precise.
No problem.